Hi, Reddit. My name is Philip. I'm 16 years old, and this entire situation still feels unreal. If someone told me a year ago that I'd end up calling the police on my mom's boyfriend for dumping his kids on me, I'd have laughed. But here we are. And somehow, I'm the selfish one for refusing to play babysitter during my summer break. I live with my mom, Angela, in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Ohio. It's not fancy, but it's home. We've always managed fine, just the two of us. My parents divorced when I was 12, and it was rough, but we got through it together. Mom works hard, sometimes too hard. She picks up double shifts, helps out at a local diner, and still somehow manages to come home and ask me about my day. She's always been my person, you know? The one who gets me. Or at least she used to. A few months ago, she started dating this guy named Rick. He's 38, works in construction, and has 2 kids of his own. Ethan, who's 7, and Ryan, who's 9. From the moment I met him, I didn't like him. It wasn't one big thing. It was 100 small things. The way he called my mom babe in that smug voice, even when she was clearly tired. The way he'd slap me on the shoulder like we were buddies when I barely knew him. The way he'd stretch out on our couch, remote in hand, shoes still on, acting like the apartment was his. He was loud, cocky, the kind of guy who always needs to be the center of attention. Mom said he was fun and good with his hands, which I guess was supposed to be a compliment. But to me, he was just intrusive. He'd make little comments too, like, "You need to toughen up, kid," or, "Back in my day, 16-year-olds actually worked." I have a part-time job at a movie theater, by the way. But sure, Rick, tell me about your glory days. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, Mom and Rick sat me down on a Friday night. She looked all excited, like she'd been waiting to tell me something big. Rick had that grin that made my stomach turn. Mom said, "Philip, we're going on a little trip." Just for a week. Florida, Rick found a great deal. I said that was nice and that she deserved a break. But then Rick chimed in, leaning back like he was making a business proposal. "You can watch the boys while we're gone. It'll be good practice for you." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. I literally laughed out loud. But then I realized neither of them was smiling. Mom was looking down at her hands, and Rick was staring at me like he'd just said something completely reasonable. I said, "Wait, what?" Rick shrugged. "It's not that big a deal. Just feed them, keep them alive, you know. 7 days, tops. You're 16, practically an adult." I said no immediately, not rudely, just firmly. "I'm not babysitting anyone, Rick. They're not my responsibility." Mom gave me this nervous look like she was hoping I'd change my mind. "Honey, he doesn't have anyone else right now, and it's only a week." I cut her off. "I already have plans, Mom. I'm working shifts next week. I have a group project. I'm not spending my summer watching someone else's kids." Rick gave me this smirk, the kind of smirk people give when they think you're bluffing. "Come on, kid. It's not that hard. They're good boys. Just make some mac and cheese and make sure they don't burn the place down." I said it again. No, I wasn't joking. He looked annoyed like I was being unreasonable. He muttered something under his breath about lazy teenagers and left it at that. Mom looked disappointed, but I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, it was Sunday morning. I was sleeping in for once because I'd worked a late shift at the theater the night before. Around 8:30, I woke up to loud knocking at the door. I groaned, pulled on a t-shirt, and went to answer it. Guess who was there? Rick. He was standing in the hallway with both his sons and 2 giant suitcases. Ethan was clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Ryan had a tablet in his hands. I just stared at them, half asleep, trying to process what I was seeing. Before I could even open my mouth, Rick brushed past me into the apartment like he owned the place. "Morning, champ," he said, dropping 1 suitcase in the living room and 1 in my room. "The boys have eaten. Should be fine until lunch. There's frozen pizza in the freezer." I said, "What are you doing?" He looked at me like I'd asked him a stupid question. "Leaving. We're running late. Be useful for once, kid." And then he left. I'm not exaggerating. He walked out, closed the door, got in his truck, and drove away. I stood there in total silence, watching the taillights disappear. Ethan looked up at me and said, "When's Daddy coming back?" Ryan asked if I had Wi-Fi. I felt my stomach drop. The first thing I did was call my mom. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. I texted her. Rick just dumped his kids here. What the hell am I supposed to do? No response. An hour went by. The boys were bored, asking for snacks, asking if I had a PlayStation. Ethan started crying because he missed his dad. I tried to comfort him, but honestly, I was angry. At Rick, at my mom, at the whole situation. I'm 16. I can't legally be responsible for 2 little kids for a week. I didn't even agree to this. By 10 a.m., Ryan asked when dinner was. That's when I realized just how out of control this was. They had no food packed, no emergency contact info, nothing. Just 2 kids and a bag of clothes. I thought about calling my aunt or one of my mom's friends, but then I realized something. If anything happened to those kids while they were here, it would be on me. Not Rick, not mom, me. And that wasn't okay. So I called the police. I explained that 2 minors had been left with me without consent or supervision, and that I was only 16. The dispatcher didn't sound surprised, which honestly made it worse. She said officers were on the way. 2 officers showed up about 30 minutes later. They were calm, professional, and kind. They spoke to me first, asked what happened, and I told them everything. They went and talked to the kids too. Ethan calmed down once one of the officers gave him a sticker and told him they were going to make sure he was safe. Then they called Child Protective Services. The whole time I was sitting there feeling this mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I wasn't going to be stuck taking care of kids I didn't agree to watch, and guilt because none of this was their fault. Ethan and Ryan were just little kids caught up in their dad's stupidity. When CPS arrived, they thanked me for calling and told me I did the right thing. They took the boys somewhere safe. I think a temporary foster home. Watching them leave hurt more than I expected. Ethan waved at me from the car. That evening, my mom finally called. I could tell right away that she was panicked. "Philip, what did you do?" She yelled the moment I answered. I asked her what she meant, and she said Rick had just called her screaming. Apparently, the police had tracked him down. He was still in the state, not even on vacation yet. He'd stopped at some motel a couple of hours away to get some rest before the trip. That's what he told them. CPS informed him he was being investigated for child abandonment. He apparently flipped out, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that I was a responsible young man and had agreed to it, which was obviously a lie. After that, he started blowing up my phone. 15 missed calls in less than an hour. I didn't answer a single one. Mom was furious, not at him, but at me. She said I'd overreacted, that I humiliated her boyfriend, that I should have called her again instead of involving the police. I told her I did call her, twice. I sent her a text. She ignored me. What was I supposed to do? She got quiet after that. She hasn't said much since. Rick hasn't come around, though. I think he's dealing with CPS and whatever legal mess he's made for himself. Part of me feels sorry for his kids. But for him? Not at all. If he thought he could dump his responsibilities on a 16-year-old and get away with it, he's learning the hard way that actions have consequences. And as for me, I'm just hoping my mom finally realizes the kind of man she's dating. Because next time, I might not be there to clean up his mess. Update 1 week later. A lot has happened since the whole babysitting disaster, and honestly, it feels like a lifetime squeezed into 7 days. I thought things would quiet down after the police got involved, but apparently Rick's mess had layers I didn't even know existed. After CPS took the kids, I didn't hear much for the first couple of days. The apartment was quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. Mom was cold toward me at first, barely speaking except to tell me when she'd be home from work. I knew she was upset, but I didn't feel guilty about what I did. I was still angry. Angry that she thought it was okay for Rick to just dump 2 little kids on me like I was some kind of built-in babysitter. Angry that she didn't answer her phone. Angry that she defended him. By the 3rd day, she came home with this pale look on her face. I could tell something was wrong before she said a word. She sat at the table, stared at her hands, and finally said that CPS had contacted her for a follow-up interview. Apparently, they discovered this wasn't the first time Rick had pulled something like this. Turns out when CPS ran his name through their system, a previous report popped up. One filed by his ex-wife almost 2 years ago. Back then, he'd left the boys alone overnight while she was out of town visiting her sick mother. A neighbor heard the kids crying and called the police. It didn't go as far as criminal charges that time, but CPS flagged it. They required him to take some parenting classes, which, surprise, surprise, he never actually completed. Mom just sat there in silence after telling me that. She looked devastated, like she was trying to piece together how she could have missed all of it. She said he never mentioned any of that. I didn't say what I was thinking, that she didn't really know him at all. Rick, on the other hand, was busy digging his own grave. Apparently, he'd been calling everyone he knew, trying to clear his name. He told some people that I tricked him, that I'd offered to watch the kids and then turned on him out of spite. Others heard he said it was all a big misunderstanding, that he thought Mom was home the whole time. The police, of course, weren't buying it. They had the 911 call, the timestamps from when officers arrived, the report from CPS, and even text between me and my mom showing I was blindsided by his stunt. When word got around about the investigation, things got even worse for him. Rick worked for a construction company that handled public projects, schools, libraries, places like that. Apparently, part of their contract required all employees to maintain a clean background and pass periodic checks. Once the investigation showed up on his record, his boss was notified. Within days, Rick was fired. Mom found out from one of his coworkers. The company didn't want to be associated with someone under investigation for child neglect. I won't lie, when I heard he lost his job, I didn't feel bad. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. He deserved it. He wasn't some unlucky guy caught in a misunderstanding. He was a grown man who thought he could dump his responsibilities on a teenager. But Rick didn't take it well. The night after he got fired, he showed up at our building. I was in my room when I heard loud banging on the front door, and not a knock, but angry pounding that made the walls vibrate. When I looked out the window, I saw him standing in the parking lot, pacing back and forth, shouting. I couldn't make out every word, but I definitely heard him yell that I ruined his life. Mom was terrified. She didn't even open the door. We called the police again, and by the time they arrived, Rick was still yelling in the parking lot. They warned him to leave and told him not to come back. He didn't get arrested, but they made it clear that if he showed up again, it would count as harassment. Watching him drive off, red-faced and shouting out the window, was surreal. I remember feeling this weird mix of relief and disgust. Relief that he was finally gone, and disgust that it took this much for my mom to see what kind of man he was. After that night, Mom finally broke up with him. She didn't make a big announcement. I just woke up the next morning to find her phone sitting face down on the counter, messages from him unanswered. She'd blocked his number, deleted his photos, and put his spare toothbrush and hoodie in a trash bag by the door. It was quiet for a long time after that. She cried a lot those next few days, not angry crying, more like quiet, embarrassed tears. She said she felt stupid for not seeing who he really was, that she wanted so badly for things to work out that she ignored the red flags. She said she thought he was a good man who needed a second chance. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her I'd seen through him from the start, but I didn't. I just told her it was fine, that we'd get through it. But inside, I was furious, not just at Rick, but at her. Because for a while there, she chose him over me. The police called a few days later to let us know that CPS had finished their initial report. Rick might face formal charges depending on what the district attorney decides. Apparently, his ex-wife is cooperating with the investigation too, since the pattern of behavior makes him look even worse. The boys are staying with her full-time now, and CPS is recommending he only see them under supervised visits until further notice. Mom's been quieter since all this. She keeps to herself more, like she's processing everything in silence. I think she's embarrassed, maybe even ashamed. Sometimes I catch her staring at me like she's trying to apologize without saying it. She's been working extra shifts, maybe to distract herself. As for me, I've been trying to move on. I go to work, hang out with my friends, and do my best not to think about that day too much. But every now and then, I remember the look on those two boys' faces. Confused, scared, waiting for a dad who never came back. I feel bad for them. None of this was their fault. Rick, though, he's getting exactly what he earned. He wanted to go on a vacation and leave his responsibilities behind. Now he's losing his job, his reputation, and possibly custody of his kids. And honestly, if it took this whole mess for my mom to finally see who he really was, maybe it was worth it. We're still picking up the pieces, emotionally mostly, but the house feels different now. Quieter, yes, but lighter somehow. Like the air isn't as heavy as it was when Rick was around. For the first time in months, it actually feels like home again. Update 2. 2 months later. I honestly thought everything with Rick was behind us, that it would fade into just another bad memory we'd occasionally joke about in the future. But life has a strange way of looping back around, tying up the loose ends you didn't even realize were still hanging. What happened over these past 2 months has been wild. Part closure, part healing, and part full circle justice. After the police and CPS wrapped up their investigations, things finally started to calm down at home. The quiet wasn't awkward anymore, it was peaceful. Mom and I got back into our normal rhythm. Movie nights, home-cooked dinners, even laughing again without that weird tension lingering in the air. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were a team again. Then, a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Mom came home from work one afternoon holding her phone like she didn't quite believe what she'd just seen. She told me Rick's ex-wife, Melissa, had reached out to her through Facebook Messenger. At first, Mom thought it was going to be something unpleasant. Maybe anger, maybe blame. But it wasn't. Melissa was kind, calm, and surprisingly grateful. She said she'd heard about everything that happened. The CPS report, the police involvement, Rick's meltdown outside our apartment, all of it. She thanked Mom for cooperating with the investigation, but then she said something that made both of us go quiet. Apparently, the evidence from my 911 call and CPS report helped her finalize her custody case. For months, she'd been fighting to get full custody of Ethan and Ryan, claiming Rick was unreliable and unsafe. The problem was, she didn't have solid proof. Just her word and a history of smaller incidents that weren't officially documented. Then our report came along. According to Melissa, CPS included my statement in her court file as supporting evidence. Between the previous neglect report from 2 years ago and what happened with me, it painted a very clear picture of a pattern. One the judge couldn't ignore. She said that because of everything that happened, the court granted her full custody. Rick would only be allowed supervised visitation once a month until he could prove he'd completed all the requirements set by CPS. I didn't even know how to process that. On one hand, I was relieved. Those kids were finally safe, and their mom seemed genuinely good-hearted. But on the other hand, it felt surreal that something I did out of panic and self-preservation ended up changing their lives so drastically. A few days later, Melissa mailed us a thank you card. It wasn't fancy. Just a simple card with a little printed "thank you" on the front and a handwritten note inside. She said that she and the boys were doing better, that Ethan had started sleeping through the night again, and that Ryan had joined a youth soccer team. Then she said something that hit me hard. "You did what adults couldn't do. You protected my kids." Inside the envelope was a $200 Amazon gift card. She wrote that it wasn't much, but she wanted to thank me personally for doing the right thing when no one else had. I stared at that card for a long time. I didn't really know how to feel. It wasn't about the money. It was about someone actually acknowledging that what I did mattered. For weeks, I'd felt like the bad guy in everyone's eyes, like the kid who overreacted and ruined everything. Now, someone, the person who mattered most in all this, was saying that I did the right thing. As for Rick, things haven't exactly gone his way. The last we heard, he took a plea deal to avoid bigger charges. He got probation and was ordered to attend mandatory parenting classes. On top of that, he's got over $1,000 in legal fees, plus whatever fines came with losing his job. From what Melissa said, he's been couch hopping between friends' places, trying to find steady work. Apparently, even his old coworkers stopped hanging out with him after word got around about why he was fired. Small towns talk, and once you're labeled as the guy under investigation for child neglect, doors start closing fast. I don't wish ruin on anyone, but let's just say karma seems to be doing its thing without any help from me. Meanwhile, things between Mom and me have changed, in a good way. After everything came out about Rick, she took a long look at herself and admitted she needed to make some changes. She started therapy about a month ago. She said she wanted to understand why she'd ignored all the red flags, why she felt so desperate to keep someone like Rick around, even when it made her uncomfortable. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just another "I'll go once or twice once" situation. But she's been going every week since then. And honestly, it's working. She's more grounded now, more aware. She doesn't let people talk over her or guilt her into things. She even set firmer boundaries with her co-workers and friends. Little things like saying no to extra shifts when she's exhausted or not loaning money she doesn't have. It's like she's rediscovering her own voice. One night, out of nowhere, she apologized to me, Not in that half-hearted, sorry you were upset kind of way, but a real, honest apology. She said she was sorry for putting me in that position, for not listening when I told her I didn't want to babysit, and for making me feel like I couldn't count on her. Then she said something that stuck with me, that she learned more from watching how I handled the situation than from anything her therapist had told her. She said she was proud of me and that I'd handled things better than most adults would have. It caught me off guard, hearing that from her. For months, I'd been carrying around this quiet resentment, like I was the only one who saw what was wrong. Hearing her say she understood now, that she saw me not as a kid who overreacted, but as someone who made the hard call, it meant everything. We're closer now than we've been in years. We talk more. We actually listen to each other. The apartment feels like it used to before Rick ever showed up. Just me and Mom, figuring things out together. As for that $200 gift card, I did something completely predictable. I bought a new gaming headset. The good kind. The one with noise cancellation and a mic that makes me sound like I actually know what I'm doing in a lobby. And every time I'm playing online and some random person yells, "Be useful," because I missed a shot, I can't help but laugh. Because, well, I already was. I might be 16, but I learned a lot from this. That doing the right thing doesn't always make you popular. That sometimes adults mess up worse than kids do. And that standing your ground, even when it feels scary or lonely, can actually change someone's life. So yeah, things are finally good again. Rick's out of our lives, Melissa's boys are safe, Mom's healing, and I'm back to being a normal teenager who just wants to finish his summer homework and play games without drama. And every now and then, when I think back on how all this started, one knock on the door, two confused kids, and one very bad decision by an even worse man, I realize something. I didn't just stand up for myself. I stood up for two little kids who needed someone to finally say no, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.